Hi guys, hello and welcome to, now we're getting to round 10. This is going to be the first round of the grand finals, getting into the end here of Season 9. We're going to be also continuing the discussion, going into Halo Infinite from last video. So I think I pretty much summed up my thoughts on the whole microtransaction situation and all that at the end of the last video. Yeah, pretty much sealed the deal on that, and when it comes to that, you know, it sucks that Halo needs that, but yeah, they're going to need that microtransaction system, and I hope they go away from anything affecting gameplay. Even though I do think it was smart how they did it in Halo 5, I do think that they should go away from that, and just some of the thoughts, hope they go full cosmetic and also earnable in-game with grinding. So basically what I'm going for. So moving on from that, so Infinite, chances of coming back, who knows, who knows. I'm looking forward to seeing some gameplay, because so far I haven't seen any of gameplay of Infinite yet, and pretty much everything I talked about in the video with Infinite, pure speculation, pure speculation. So, kind of just dominated that topic, you know, not much to go for now with Infinite. Pretty much covered that. So I think a good thing to move on to after all the Infinite discussion, even though I know I did say I was getting into the meat and potatoes at the end of the last video, but after I recorded it, I realized I was like, you know what? I wasn't really just getting into it. Like, I pretty much got everything out that I needed to say for hopes for the game and stuff. I just hope that Infinite's, like, again, just before I move on, I just hope that it's like that full Halo experience that we kind of wanted for a while, where it just has, it's got everything you'd want from a Halo game. You know, it's got theater, great forge, custom games, multiplayer, like classic Halo multiplayer, a campaign, firefight, I'd probably like, and then anything else is just bonus, right? Like that's really all that I want, is just like those things perfected, but everything else is just bonus. So like a battle royale type mode, an expanded Warzone, I would love stuff like that, but if it's not there, as long as the rest of it is great, it's not that big of a deal. So we'll see how that goes. So moving on from there, what else could I talk about? So I guess I could go over my thoughts on, like, just retrospective thoughts on the HRL in general throughout our run in Halo 5. And I think that bringing it back was a pretty great decision. I'm still pretty glad that I made that decision. To bring it back after, you know, Season 2 unfortunately got ended short and wasn't sure if Halo 5 racing would work again. I'm glad that I was like, screw it, we're going back, we're trying Halo 5 again, and I got a pretty good, you know, solid few seasons out of it. Quite a few seasons out of it, I should say. Definitely was more than a few. All the way from Season 3 up to Season 9, just great battles, great competitiveness, had some of the most competitive races that we've ever seen in HRL. Some great last minute finishes, like a lot of photo finishes. Like one of the last ones that I definitely remember was Angel Park Speedway. Not the one that we just watched, unfortunately, but the previous Angel Park Speedway. Pretty solid finish. Also, like Oval Series in general, bro. Like Capua Dome had a sick photo finish for the win. Capua Dome is actually, I don't know why I mentioned Angel Park. Like Capua Dome, Angel Park was just like a great end of the race. But if we're talking photo finish, Capua had the craziest photo finish maybe in HRL history with how close it was. Like that was genuinely just a judgment call between Fireball and Camby with how freaking close that finish was. And I still think that Camby got it, but just honestly, like you could have went either way. Like that's how close it was. Easily closest finish I've ever seen on Halo 5. And yeah, like that having those races, that's why I'm glad that we brought it back, because we just, when I think about it, it's like, wow, if we didn't decide to bring it back, wouldn't have had any of those. And there was definitely a lot of good, you know, new memories formed. Now I want to talk more about like I was gonna say the boring side of things, but it's not really boring. But just like, you know, format wise, bringing it back and how that went. So basically in Season 3, it was a pretty classic HRL format of, you know, low person heats, but a lot of heats, essentially. So like if we had a 16-person lobby, we'd run 4 heats of 4. And I'm pretty sure, yeah, I think Season 3, as far as I remember, was just heats and the full race. And that's how it was. So Season 3 was like that, and it went pretty well. Like, it was good for a little comeback season. But after that, it was like, you know, we could make this even more. We could make this more competitive, and I think just a better experience overall. So we made some core changes. And overall, I don't think Season 3 was bad, which is why we did revert, like, somewhat to some Season 3 aspects in Season 9, like the recent season. I don't know why it took me so long to think of it. That's why we sort of did revert back a little bit to some parts of Classic HRL in that recent season, because there were some good things about it. But in Season 4, a lot of people, like, we just kind of had I think we just kind of had a consensus across everybody that was racing that, you know, it could have been a bit more. So in Season 4, decided to add in the semis, decided to change up the way heats work. I believe pretty much kept motos the same as far as I'm aware. But yeah, decided to switch up the heats and add in the semis. And I think that was a big change. Season 4, as far as I recall, though, I don't believe had qualifying. I think Season 5 is when we added in qualifying. Maybe I'll double check that in a second. But yeah, Season 4, I guess I could generalize it. Season 4, 5, 6 in general were just like stepping up the competition and trying to make it like the most competitive possible. The reason why in Season 9 we reverted on a little bit of that is because I realized that just time-wise, like, yeah, in theory we did have like the most competitive format possible in like those seasons 4 through like even 7. But the reason for switching it up in 8 and 9 is because I realized that time-wise there were some issues, right? Like, for me, it got to the point, and I think there was definitely quite a few racers that could relate to this, because I think a lot of people enjoyed this aspect of Season 9, but it just got so frustrating sitting through several minutes of qualifying, just sitting there waiting for everybody to get qualified, and then sitting through the heats, and then sitting through a semi on top of that, and just so much waiting for things to happen. And it's like, could we just get into a race and just have a big race and have everybody compete? So that was the reasoning behind the change for Season 9 and Season 8. Was just all the sitting and waiting, all the time spent doing that. Me, and I'm sure quite a few other people, got tired of it, you know? Especially the qualifying. I think a lot of people can relate on that, because qualifying, as fun as qualifying is, man, the amount of time that we had to have sat there just waiting for people to qualify, it just became too much. And I just got tired of it. So that's why we ended up, in the end, I think, making a better decision to go back from qualifying and to go back into longer races. Instead of having a 2-moto format, just have a long one race, kind of like the ORL format, taking some inspiration from that. Because even though there was always like a little bit of inspiration from ORL, we were also always sort of our own thing with the format. And as much as I enjoyed the 2-moto format, there became a point where I was like, I don't know, I think that competitively, which was a lot of our focus, I think that competitively, the one long moto actually made more sense. And it also, like, there's pros and cons, right? But the long moto format, the thing that I liked about it is with the Moto 1 and 2 format, with the short motos, you just did not experience those, you know, crazy comebacks that you would have with a longer race. Like, those just rarely happened. A lot of the times they were like in the process of happening, but were stopped short because it was just too difficult, man, to pull off a crazy comeback with that small of an amount of time. So those just didn't happen. So that's one benefit of bringing that longer moto back. You just get more comebacks. You get more races that just evolved in ways that you didn't expect, I suppose, throughout the race. And on top of that, another benefit is you just get longer, on top of the comebacks, you get longer lasting battles. Like, you get battles that just last a significant portion of time. With going back to the older motos. And with the original moto format, a lot of battles didn't really get to flourish because, you know, unless it was a lead battle, if you were battling super hard in the 2-moto format, and let's say, you know, you're battling super hard and it's like for 5th place or something like that, you know, it got to the point where it was like, why take that battle? You know, people were just making really aggressive, really cucky passes, and just racing dirtier, and understandably so, because if you don't do that, you're just not going to have enough time to get to the front. It just doesn't happen. Whereas with the newer format, with the longer moto, we were able to, get back to getting some of those longer battles. Because if you took a battle with that format, you weren't as screwed. Like you weren't completely screwed having a solid battle for 5th place. Because old format, you might have a solid battle for 5th place, and then it's like, oh, now I've got 3 minutes to get all the way up to 4th, and anywhere beyond that. Whereas newer format, you might have a solid battle for 5th, and then be like, all right, nice, I've got 12 minutes left of this race to go. Like I genuinely still have a shot at making it happen and getting some more positions. Obviously, there's some downsides to it. Like if you the comeback is nice, but what if you have like a really terrible start? At least with the Moto 1 and 2 format, you might get a bad finish in Moto 1, but then get to bring it back with Moto 2. Whereas with this different format, with a longer race, you get screwed over early. You do get that opportunity for the comeback, so that's where I think the balance comes from. But if you get screwed over really hard early, you don't get another moto. Like, you need to go for that comeback. You know what I mean? Like, you don't get that chance at a good start again. Like, you need to go for that comeback, and that is kind of a downside. So that I will admit. Again, though, I think the balancing measure with that is the opportunity for comeback. But oh well. So it's just really different preferences, right? Like, that's what we went through with the different seasons and the different rule changes and format changes. It just constantly experimenting and trying to find what we felt like worked the best for the league as a whole, I suppose. And just competition wise and entertainment wise as well, also factored in how fun was it. Just trying to find that balance, and that balance is, and I'm sure you guys will find out running the league now that I'm gone, that balance is very, very hard to find. That is not an easy balance to achieve. It takes a lot of work, and you're always going to be changing. People's opinions are always going to be changing. You're going to find stuff that you think works really well in one season, and then in the future you're like, maybe we should switch this up. I really don't enjoy this anymore. Whether it's genuinely you have a good reason for switching it up, or maybe you just feel like you need to switch up. That's just the way it is. But at the same time, I'm glad that with our comeback that we kept switching up the format. I think it, kind of made things interesting. Kind of like when we would change the tracks when bringing them back. Just something to always mix things up and to make it feel unique, make it feel fresh, and just hopefully prevent the burnout, preventing getting bored essentially. So I'm glad that we did that. So overall, though, my thoughts, I was mostly focusing on the motos, but obviously the heats. I think one of the bigger switches as well, besides the moto switch, was one that we eventually, pretty much throughout the whole tenure, always stuck with, was the heat change. Instead of running we have 16 people run 4 heats of 4, running 2 heats of 8, and switching that up. That was definitely a pretty big change that's probably forgotten about. I really like that change. I think that was easily the best change that. As far as I'm aware, I never heard that many people complaining about it. So as far as I'm aware, I think the majority of people agreed with that change, and I agreed with them. I think it was a pretty solid change. I think that I don't know. I just think that having a 16-person lobby and then doing 4 heats of 4 just felt kind of weird. It's why not just do 2 split bigger races? Because then they genuinely feel like a warm up for a moto, Whereas without those extra people, it just feels kind of it doesn't feel like a warm up for a moto. It feels like a small practice session instead of a warm up for a race, if that makes sense. That's why I preferred the way that we switched them to. It just felt more. It just felt better. Sometimes it's hard to put into words, but it just felt better. Whereas with the 4 heats of 4, it got a lot more spread out as well. They just weren't as interesting, I suppose. Whereas I feel like the 2 heats with 8 was pretty consistently interesting, and I think that we started to have a lot more memorable heat races. Whereas that wasn't really a thing before, but after we switched to that, there were a lot of heat races where I'm even after I stopped recording heat races and putting them in the videos, we started having some heat races where I was like, wow, I should consider putting these in the video because they're so competitive. So that was one of the better changes that we made. The semi, I don't know. The semi, I went back and forth on. I'm happy that we removed it, but it wouldn't have been a terrible thing because it doesn't last that long if we kept it in. Semis were fun. They were also annoying at times. I don't know. I'm kind of in between on the semi. Qualifying, I'm glad that we got rid of because as much as I enjoy qualifying, just too much time. Too much time for me. Did not enjoy it. Just felt like a waste. and I would rather just personally, I would rather just get to the racing. That's just me though. So that was kind of my stance on like how we went with the format and stuff like that. I liked the switch to the bigger heats. The semis I'm kind of indifferent on. The qualifying, I'm kind of glad that we got rid of eventually. I wish that we didn't spend as much time qualifying as we did, because I think about how much time that we spent just sitting there waiting for people to qualify and constantly doing the stopwatch, and it's just like, ugh, I really wish I did not put that much time into that. And put you guys through it as well, because it's not just me, like everybody has to sit there waiting for everybody else to frickin' do their turn, and it's just not a great thing for everybody. And people have things to do, especially the people in the UK. Like the qualifying is like an hour, sometimes like 30 minutes to an hour of time waiting for qualifying and waiting for warm-ups, instead of just getting to the race. So my bad on that. And the moto format, again, personally, I think I kind of went through it earlier. You probably got the idea. I definitely preferred the longer motos. Although I don't think the 2 moto format's terrible either. Like, I definitely think it's a preference thing, and I would like either personally. I think that for season 8 and 9, I wish that we got to do more seasons going back to the longer 1 moto, because I do think that was better. I do think there were a few more comebacks. There were a few more like extended battles. Some crazy finishes as well, like for example the Genoa race that we just watched, with that last lap joker coming into play, and the top 3 between Fireball, Luke, and Realdil was up for grabs throughout that entire race. Like, you just didn't get as many races like that, I think, with the 2 moto format. So personally, I prefer the longer one, but I could understand. Like, I'm not going to argue with anybody that prefers the 2 moto format. You know what I mean? Like, I genuinely think it's preference. There's pros and cons to both, and I could understand either way. Just overall, my personal preference has to definitely lean towards that final format we came up with. So, yeah, and again, this is another topic where, like, again, just like I mentioned at the end of the last video, like, if you have anything to say in the comments, let me know, because I'm still curious. Like, even though I'm not running it anymore, I'm still curious on like what everybody's thoughts were and what their dream format would be, because everybody has different opinions on that, right? And that's the thing. That's why it's hard to do a consensus type thing, because everybody has like vastly different formats that they'd like to do, and it just, like, you kind of need one person to decide on a format, if that makes sense, because otherwise you would just have like it would feel like a movie made by a committee and not by a director, is what I'm getting at. Like, it would feel bloated instead of like it has a vision, is what I'm getting at. So yeah, now that I went through all that, like I said, let me know like what you liked about the formats, what your dream format would be. Pretty much just that, yeah. But moving on with it, is there anything else like format wise? I'm gonna check out the docs quick and see if there's anything else format wise that I'd like to talk about, because I do think I actually enjoyed talking about that. Like, that was an interesting topic. Hold on one second. Well, I just noticed something immediately that would be interesting for discussion wise, like the team championships, because we had like some minor changes to how that worked, and there was always discussion on teams and experimentation with that, and between like 2 and 3 man teams, like what worked better and stuff like that. Personally, I think that racer wise, like the count of how many racers we had and just getting the most competitive teams possible, I think that 2-man teams were the way to go. And if you look at season 9, like, if the attendance for all the teams, obviously it didn't, right? Because it never does. You can't have that happen. Like, it just never does. But if you looked at the beginning of season 9, like, if the attendance stayed consistent, it genuinely would have been like the closest overall team battle between potentially like all the teams. Could have genuinely had a shot at the championship. So I think that the team system that we got in the last season was the one we got right in terms of just competitiveness. Because yeah, like those before attendance started to be a factor, as it always is, it was genuinely the best team battle in the beginning, and I think that definitely would have continued throughout the rest of the season. Like, obviously certain teams would have stretched, and it wouldn't have been perfect, but I think it would have. I still think it would have went pretty well. So yeah, I liked that final season 9 team system, but I know people wanted to experiment with that, and curious to hear thoughts on that as well. What people would have wanted to have, but just personally, I think competition wise, I think that our season 9 system The way we did the draft and the way we set up the draft just worked the best for season 9. And oh my god, man, I'm still kind of triggered that the attendance didn't work out, because the way season 9 started, oh my god, it was so good, so close with the team balance. Like, I felt like this is it. We finally got it down, and then the attendance screws it over, as always. Just so disappointing. But you know, what can you do? Like, that's always what happens. What can you do? Oh well. And I do think it's hilarious. I think we got to mention that I was able to carry Jared to a team championship. That's got to be the highlight of season 9, right? The fact that Jared is a team champion. Like, he's the people's champion, right? Everybody wanted Jared to be a team champion. Like, just even though it's a team championship, just the fact that Jared is technically a champion at anything in HRL is just hilarious. So, just had to put the carry pants on for that one to make that happen, because it's just too funny. I want Jared to have, like, in his resume when he goes to work at the coffee shop, I want it to just say Halo 5 Racing Team Champion. I just want that to be in there. I know that's not going to happen, but I just want that to be included. Because it's Jared. Maybe put it, I'll settle for his Xbox Live bio. He should put it in his bio on Xbox that he's a Halo 5 2018 Team Champion. Because that would just make my year. Oh, sorry for spoiling the team championship, by the way. But if you looked at it, like, the team championship was basically locked up before Guerco was even raced. So, I didn't really spoil it. Like, I'm pretty sure it was already locked up. So, whereas the grand finals champion, though, and all that is still up for grabs. And to get into that, Details coming around to take the win here, looking to be off to a good start, trying to lock up the regular. He's looking good for the regular season and the grand finals championship. So he's off to a good start here. But again, there's 2 more tracks, and he's going to need to close it out on those tracks. Coming up, Barvo Speedway after this, and Mirabilis. Classic tracks to end off this final season that I'm running. So just, storybook ending. Perfect tracks for the ending, I think, for the last grand finals. Yeah, Detail takes the win. I believe it's Luke 2nd, Real Deal 3rd, Slaunch 4th. Who's 5th? I'm not sure if I read that. Let me check. I honestly don't remember. 5th was Roman. Okay, there he is. That makes sense. Okay, so Roman rounds out the top 5. So pretty good start. Pretty good start to the grand finals here. And I'm thinking, because I've done all these discussion videos and I'm starting to run the topics dry. I think Mirabilis, I do have, like, some nostalgic stuff to talk about. But for Barvo, I'm going to do one classic commentary. See you guys there.